Hey, what's going on, guys? Rum Gaming here, back in another video. Today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at Ian's interview with the assistant lead quest designer, Mark Collada, and they kind of discussed some of the changes coming in 11.1. And these aren't necessarily confirmed changes, these are just things that have been discussed for 11.1, but they kind of talked a little bit about Mythic Plus and the reward structure that kind of goes with it. And they kind of just gave us some insight on some potential changes or just things that they're looking at the moment. So they actually discussed a whole bunch of things here, but the two main things I'm going to talk about is Mythic Plus difficulty and rewards, and then the upgrade Crest system. So just to kind of read it out here, the Mythic Plus Crest gearing system meets almost all of our design goals, save for that clarity and intuitiveness. That is one area we want to focus on in terms of naming them, tutorialization, and so on. We want to make it more logical about what you should be doing with Crest. The idea is to give players of all playstyles goals to work towards, with ongoing power advancements beyond specific item drops. Crests are an important part of the tiered structure of World of Warcraft, helping ensure that the best way to get stronger is to push into harder content, rather than just grinding basic content massively, as we saw previously with artifact power and things like that. You should want to complete higher tier dungeons, but making it clearer on how to get there is something we want to address. So one thing you said right at the start is the Mythic Plus Crest system almost meets all of our design goals. And I think he's got a pretty good point. I think the Crest system is okay, but there's definitely room for improvement here. The main problem that I see with the Crest system is you have to gear out your character, then you have to max out that specific track, right? Like champion, veteran, heroic, mythic. You almost have to re-gear your champion each track. And then, of course, with each track comes an entire new set of crests you kind of have to grind through. And to be honest, on like your main, it's not that big of a deal because you're playing your main every single week. You're getting vaults. You're kind of slowly progressing into that next track of gear. The problem where the crest system really fails is when you get into your alts. And sure, they have done a whole bunch of things over past expansions to kind of make the game more alt friendly, but I personally do not think that gearing an alt is super friendly at the moment. And people like to make this argument that gearing is the easiest it's ever been, and they might be correct in that, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's still where it needs to be at. And I do think that this is one of the big reasons that Mythic Plus seasons kind of die off, is because it's just so much of a time investment to play an alt. To go through that track system again is just an absolute grind. And, you know, I think it all has to do with this crest system. So it takes quite literally thousands, probably 1,000 plus crests to take an alt all the way through the gearing system. And that's really hard in the middle of the season because most people are already doing 7, 8, 9, 10 keys. And it's just kind of hard to form a group at that lower level, especially if you're something like a DPS who has to wait 10 minutes to get into a dungeon. So they really need to make the crest system a little bit more straightforward. Instead of having all these different tiers, then in my opinion, there needs to be one currency that you progress all the way through, and that higher keys should reward more crests. So the reward should scale exponentially. So a 10 key should give exponentially more crests than a 3 or a 4 key. A 10 key should give exponentially more rewards than a 7 key or an 8 key or even a 9 key. It should always be worth it to go up a key level. Now, a lot of people will probably argue, well, if people are pushing as high keys as they possibly can, that's going to break a lot of the lower level key groups from making farm groups and alts kind of joining into those groups to farm out crest. So that's going to lead it to being even more difficult for us to gear alts because everybody's going to be trying to push 9s and 10s. So those low-level farm groups will be taken out of the pool. And, you know, to be honest, that's a pretty good point. But I think the way that Blizzard would have to combat this is to make the 2 to 6 key range, make the rewards faster. This way, people can get their alts in, they can get their rewards, they can complete, you know, X amount of dungeons, say 10, 15 dungeons, and then be decently geared to be able to push higher into Mythic Plus, at least have their foundation set pretty quickly. So I think that they need a single currency, and then the rewards and the crest required to upgrade should kind of scale exponentially as you go up in key level. I don't think this should be a linear track. I think this should be sort of an exponential curve. And you need that exponential curve, or people are just simply going to farm 4s and 5s or whatever crest level to get as many crests as possible to upgrade their gear, right? So we want that sense of progression. I think that's kind of what Ian's hinting towards. This is all speculation, by the way. This is just kind of my opinion here, but it does look like there are going to be some changes coming to how the Crest system works. I think another good idea would be some sort of like a refund system for gear. So you could go in, take your lower level piece of gear, refund it, get some currency back, and then you could use those refunded crests into upgrading your next piece. Now, I already know that a lot of people are going to be in the comments kind of complaining about how Mythic Plus, the gearing system, is already one of the fastest ways to gear in the game. Why does it need more? What about raid? What about other types of content? And to be completely honest, I agree. I think that other types of content needs to be more accessible in terms of gear. I think quest rewards should give better gear. I think if Blizzard wants a season to live, they need to make low-end gear more accessible. And that's why I think delves are so good for the game right now, because low-end gear is very accessible. But I do think that needs to be translated to other parts of the game, like raid, like Mythic Plus, like questing, so that people can get an alt up to a competitive level in a decent amount of time and not feel like if you get behind the curve, you're just forever lost in the abyss. Now, this next section here, he did actually talk about delves. Now that we're on the topic of delves, let's go ahead and read this out. So Ian said on Mythic Plus, I think this was a season of experiments. We changed the way affixes work, the way progression is structured, and we have been iterating based on feedback. A big focus for the team right now is to smooth out some particular pain points in specific dungeons while looking at class balance. We also don't feel like we have a proper on-ramp into the system, and this is kind of the delve part we were talking about earlier. For a lot of players hitting level 8 delves, you're getting very powerful rewards at that point. When you look across from there to Mythic Plus, you can feel like there's no point in doing anything below a Mythic 7. And 7 and up is actually quite hard. If you're someone without experience of dungeons, a begin with the plus 7 is not the best point of entry, and it certainly wasn't designed to be a point of entry. So we think some players are hitting a cliff wall. So we see a lot of people bouncing off that would have previously had home in early Mythic Plus tiers. So for Season 2, that's one of the big things we're going to address there. It just wasn't something we could change in the middle of Season 1. Now, I hope this isn't him talking about potentially nerfing delves, because I personally think delves are in a pretty good spot, and they give us a good way to gear our ult. Now, the problem with delves is I would actually have the opposite argument. I wish that you could farm them even more and that they weren't locked. The rewards from delves weren't locked behind keys. Or if they are, just give us a way to get more keys. I think delves give us a great way to be able to gear our ults and to kind of get us into some of that semi-competitive content right out the gates. And to be honest, I don't think many people are really jumping into a 7 key right off the bat. I mean, for one, you have to level your key up to a 7 to even get there. And then I don't think anybody is going to be inviting somebody with a 0 IO score into a 7. So I'm not sure if this is really like a big thing to tackle, but that is something that they are looking at. Overall, taking a look at this, it looks like they could potentially make some changes to the delve reward structure. And then they could also be making some changes to the Crest system, the upgrade system. And I do personally think that it needs to be easier to gear our alts to get into that 5 to 6 key range initially. I do like the Mythic Plus squish that they've done this season, you know, going from key 2 to 10 now instead of from 2 to 20 or whatever it was before. I just think progressing through the early stages of the key system just takes too long still. I still don't think it's quite alt-friendly enough. And I think this is one of the main reasons that we see seasons die out on a consistent basis, is simply because it's just too hard to start an alt and go through that entire gearing system again. And a good redesigned Crest system could completely change that. So this is very exciting. I hope that they take this in the right direction. This could be a massive win for Blizzard if they tackle this correctly. I understand they want people to sink time into the game, but if they want to hold on to that player retention, I do really think that the game needs to be more alt-friendly and allowing people to get into that somewhat competitive content more quickly. Okay, guys, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. See you on the next one.